Hello and welcome back to the Last Word on Spurs, back for yet another opposition preview. Massive game for Tottenham, of course. Our opening Champions League group stage game. What a lovely thing that is to say. Tottenham Hotspur taking on Marseille at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on Wednesday evening. There's going to be a cauldron of noise. We're absolutely delighted, as I say, to be providing you with instant post-match analysis after those games. And delighted to have joining me once again, harassing him so far this week. He's done an audio version for us in terms of a preview. We've got him on for the YouTube preview. We're delighted to be joined by freelance journalist Luke Entwhistle. Luke, thank you so much for your time. How are you, firstly?
I'm great, thanks. Thanks for having me on, Ricky. 2 times in a couple of days, so I'm really filling the channel, which very happy about that.
Oh, listen, mate, it's our absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. Listen, it's a massive game, absolute massive game for Tottenham, massive game for Marseille. Just opening thoughts really on when that draw came out. What were your thoughts of drawing Tottenham from the group?
I think there were quite a few poor teams, great teams, poor in terms of Marseille, teams that Marseille would not want to draw in Tottenham's pot. I think it wasn't the worst draw. It definitely wasn't the best draw. So I think there's maybe not quite ambivalence towards it. But I think when you're in the Champions League and Marseille just happy to be back in the Champions League, I think you just accept that when you're in that draw, you're going to be playing against some of the best teams. And I think there's certainly an awareness down here that this is a bit of a resurgent Tottenham side under Antonio Conte. I think people are quite aware of that. So, definitely wariness. But when you get into the Champions League, you kind of just accept that you're quite likely to face some of the best teams. And you have to accept that, I suppose.
Absolutely. I think when the draw came out, I think out of that pot, probably Marseille were the one team Spurs were probably looking to avoid. They were highlighted as a team that would be, a fairly dangerous side, got some really good players in there. Look, you don't need to say as a Spurs fan, this is obviously a massive game for the football club back in the Champions League under Antonio Conte. For you, who are the danger men Spurs need to really look out for on Wednesday night? Who could really hurt them?
So, funnily enough, most of the danger men are Arsenal men or former Arsenal men. I'm not sure if there'll be added motivation there. Some of them have left the club permanently, but one of the biggest danger men is still an Arsenal player, and it's Nuno Tavares, who's looked brilliant since arriving at Marseille, on loan from Arsenal this season. No buy option in that, so he will be returning to the Emirates at the end of the season. But Marseille play with basically actually the same system that Tottenham play with, that 3-4-3 that is sometimes a 3-5-2, depending on exactly what kind of personnel they have in there. But the danger men are the wide men. So you've got Nuno Tavares on the left, and you've got Jonathan Klaus, who they signed from Lens this summer, on the right-hand side. Both of them are kind of the architects of most attacking phases for the club. And Tavares in particular has already scored quite a few goals, some quite impressive ones as well, longer range strikes from outside the box. He's getting in very, very dangerous positions. Lots of players are being dragged over towards that right-hand side, which has at times been inhabited by Jonathan Klaus, Dimitri Payet, and also Matteo Guendouzi. So there's another Arsenal player. There's quite a few of them in this team, including Sead Kolasinac as well. So there's lots and lots of Arsenal men, former Arsenal men in this side. And lots of players kind of get dragged into this right-hand space. And what you find is that for Nuno Tavares on the left, there can be a little bit more space than perhaps you'd expect. So he's a massive threat. Alexis Sanchez, another Arsenal man. He has looked great since arriving, I should say, in Ligue 1. But he looks a bit more like the player that you saw at Arsenal rather than the one that you saw at Manchester United or at Inter Milan after that. He is enjoying a little bit of resurgence. He's only just arrived. He arrived with a lot of fanfare, really high expectations that I didn't personally think he'd live up to. But the early signs have been positive. And in his first start, he scored 2, I believe it was. I was at the game at Nice at the Mediterranean Derby, not this weekend, but the weekend before that. And he really ran the show, scored 2 goals, highly impressive. So he is once again someone who should be factored in when approaching the game. Whereas I think for a couple of years he was a little bit of a forgotten man, a bit of a yesterday man. But he's really enjoying a little bit of a late season revival. And then another former Premier League man, Dimitri Payet, who it's unsure as to whether he is going to be actually featuring at all. But he still has the potential to do a decent amount of damage. He doesn't play quite as he used to. He really kind of drops into the half spaces and links play up nowadays. but very effective at doing that. A little bit of a complicated relationship with new manager Igor Tudor, so there's never any guarantees that he will start or even feature at all.
Interesting. You rattled off so many names there. We do feel like we're facing an Arsenal fringe 11. If I'm being honest with you, Luke, it's going to be crazy. There's no added need or incentives in terms of for those Marseille players and also for Spurs. It's really interesting because, again, going into the fixture, with it being an opening game, I just wonder, how do you think Marseille will approach that? Do you think they'll be happy to come away with a point, or is that just not their style of football? Will be coming to really impress their philosophy on Spurs and go for a win? How do you see them approaching the game?
It's a very, very hard one to judge, because I'd say under Jorge Sampaoli last year, who is no longer their manager, I would have expected them to definitely go out and try to impose themselves on Tottenham and definitely go for the win. Igor Tudor is the new man in from this summer, former Hellas Verona boss, and we don't really know. They've not faced a big side yet, so we don't really know how, with all due respect to Nice, but they're a little bit of a mess at the minute. It's very much a team in transition with Lucien Favre. So they've not really had a big game where you can say, right, are they going to be more pragmatic here? Are they going to go out and just try and attack and go for the win? So it's really, really hard to say exactly how they're going to approach that. I think they'll definitely be very happy with a draw. If you go to Tottenham as Marseille and you come away with a point, I think you have to be very, very happy with that. But it will be interesting to see exactly how attacking they go. With that back three that can become a back five, it's quite easy to tactically revert to a more defensive mindset rather than an attacking mindset. Jonathan Klaus on the right-hand side is particularly good defender. He's a great wing back. He's great going forward, but he's also a very good defender. Tavares, not been tested. Could be someone that Tottenham target, but if they go into a back five and he's an integral part of that defence, they can attack him, I'd say.
Obviously interesting, Luke. Obviously completing this group for us, we've got Frankfurt and Sporting Lisbon. I just wonder overall, what's the chances you give both of those sides, us obviously and yourselves, of actually advancing to the next stage? What do you think?
I think Marseille have a decent chance of progressing there. I mean, I can't say I know too much about Sporting Lisbon, but Marseille have got a good side. They have started the season well. I think they've got a decent chance, to be honest. They have a decent squad full of experienced players, but I think experience does count a lot in the Champions League. And I think that experience could just count and take them over the line potentially, but it will be difficult for them. You know, that has to be said. French teams have also struggled in recent years in the Champions League. That's no secret. Even PSG, with all their riches, have only made one Champions League final, and every year they kind of put in the hatters. On paper, this team should perform and should be right up there in the semis and the final potentially, but it doesn't necessarily work out. But I think that Marseille have a decent chance, decent side, a little bit unpredictable, but it's kind of it's one of those kind of clubs as Marseille. It's always on kind of the precipice of crisis, but always seems to muddle. Well, not always, but often seems to muddle through.
Obviously, what's interesting, Luke, is when you look at Spurs' record in the Champions League, obviously in terms of just Antonio Conte's in general, he hasn't got the strongest, and there's been that question at the moment in terms of whether he's going to be able to manage the group from Premier League to Champions League, that quick turnaround. I'm sure you know the Premier League is now becoming one of the most hardest leagues, if not the hardest in the world in terms of the turnaround. Even the bottom 10, I can honestly say I don't know a league that is just so tough mentally, physically on the players, week to week, game by game. I'm intrigued from your perspective, from a Marseille view, how do they manage that? I mean, again, are we expecting it to be as tough for Marseille as it would be for a Premier League side, or is it a different bit of balance there based on maybe the quality in, obviously, Liga in comparison to the Premier League?
Yeah, so it does allow for a little bit more rotation. I mean, obviously the Premier League, almost every side that you're coming up against week in, week out is going to be of some quality. I think the spending this summer attests to that a little bit as well. Well, quite a lot. But Marseille managed to rest players at the weekend against Auxerre. So a little bit lucky potentially with the weekend opponent that they faced. Auxerre have only just been promoted back up to Ligue 1. Have had a decent start to the season, but players like Alexis Sanchez could be rested. Nuno Tavares didn't start, for example. So yeah, there is a little bit more of an option to rotate. But I'd also say that Marseille didn't have luck. It was just so happened to be that Auxerre was their opponent before this fixture, which allowed them to rest a few of those key players ahead of this game. I think it could get more difficult. I'm not sure who they play the weekend before the return fixture, but yeah, definitely potential for there's many good teams in Ligue 1 nowadays. There's lots of teams who have stepped up a level. I think Varsity Lens, Nantes had a good season last season and can be dangerous on their day. And these are kind of middling sides that are kind of pushing up. So depending on their calendar after this, I think it could be difficult the longer the group stages go on for them. But at least for this first game, I think they should be quite fresh.
And you also mentioned the fact that for you feel this is probably the biggest test so far of the manager playing Tottenham, Champions League, Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. It's going to be, I know, an unbelievable atmosphere. I think the Spurs are already preparing to unveil the Tifos once again. I'm sure it's going to be an amazing atmosphere. Give us what you think a prediction will be for this one. I know you've already done it for our audio version, so please forgive us for asking you again, Luke. Prediction, have you changed your mind since that prediction you gave us over the weekend?
Not changed my mind, no, but I was just actually having a look at the fixture before the return leg, and they actually play Strasbourg a couple of days before away. That would be a difficult game, so that rotation could be a little bit more difficult. In terms of my prediction, not changed. 2-3-1, I think, is my prediction. I definitely see Tottenham scoring a few, to be honest. As I say, they actually have only conceded 3, which is the lowest in the league on this season. But a lot of that is due to the opponents that they faced and the fact that they simply haven't been challenged. The one that would have been expected to challenge them was OGC Nice, who, as I say, team transition didn't really threaten that back line. But the back line will probably be, it'll have Kolasinac in it, it'll have Mbemba in it. The other one, probably Belavi as someone like that. But they can probably be got at. They've not been tested. Tavares is, as Tottenham fans already know, susceptible defensively. I think there's goals to be had, but I do also think that Marseille will have their chances and could also score themselves. Remains to be seen if Payet gets on the pitch, but if he does, then he's still very much a danger man. But he was actually not fit at the weekend, so he is a fitness kind of worry for the team. So it remains to be seen whether he'll be there, but they've got enough in the offensive phases to cause quite a few issues for Tottenham.
Right, and I've got to say, look, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure having you. We've all given you mad, done audio, you've done video for us. I think lots of Spurs fans are going to be wondering, obviously, in terms of Marseille, how that's going to figure out, because obviously we've got you in a return fixture as well. So where can everybody check out the wonderful work you provide, freelance journalists? Where can everybody find your views on Marseille and in general, obviously the French division as well?
So I cover a lot of the French division, kind of Riviera football, especially Nice and Monaco as well. So I'm on Twitter at just at Luke Entwhistle, just my name. But I write for Get French Football News. I write for Monaco Life, and I also do the Ligue 1 podcast, and I do that fairly regularly. So you can always catch my views, hot takes that never turn out to be true on there on a fairly regular basis.
Well, listen, Luke, we've absolutely loved having you on for this preview. We're really looking forward to having you back on for the reverse fixture. So, listen, all the best. I can't obviously wish you luck for Wednesday's game. I know you'll be covering it, I'm sure, for Marseille. But thank you so much for coming on to Last Word on Spurs. Looking already forward to the return.
No, thanks very much for having me on, Ricky. Look forward to coming back.
Fingers crossed. Thank you so much. Cheers, Luke.